Call to order the Tuesday, August 10th City Council work session. I need an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Start right off with our chat phase. There's no audience. Anybody out there? Stacy? Okay.
We had a person that contacted us that was going to be on Zoom.
Okay.
Is
But her number's not up here.
971389.
She's not up here right yet.
Okay. That was it.
The only other one I have listed is Jesse from Cardam, and that's a agenda item, so we'll. Our first item then is our fireworks parameters. Jason, are you starting that one?
Yes, sir. So as you know, we had a good 4th of July. Several discussions came up starting that night, and since then with different counselors, but also our municipal court judge who has resigned.
Because of the fireworks?
Yeah. The fines of $5,000 for a sparkler, he said was a bit much.
And he resigned?
So was part of the conversation was to bring it back to you guys and see if that's something that you're wanting to stick with is $5,000. And part of that is the municipal code, the way it's written is that if it's during fire season, it can go up one level, and with fireworks being $1,000, not during fire season, they go up to $5,000. And the only citations that were issued this year were for 4 different incidents with sparklers involved.
Okay.
I always thought sparklers should be exempt, but
I was looking at the language on the violations. The key word to me was handheld sparkling device as compared to the ground fountains. So if we could just shift the handheld sparkling device up to level 1, that would make it still a violation, but not as dramatic.
Not to exceed $100.
Mhm.
But I also kind of agree with Mike that sparkling was the one thing that just, you put them on birthday cakes, so.
Well, I think it kind of depends on where you use the sparkler. If you're using it in dune grass, you know, you have a potential for fire.
One thing that we had talked about, that we have cited people for, whether it was something that was illegal or not, if they are doing something that's dangerous, such as that, in a dangerous area, they can still be charged with a crime of reckless burning. You know, that would fit better with that than a fine.
Like throwing them.
Yeah, or just doing it in an environment where you're in a highly flammable environment. And that's certainly something we would go after as well, just because as a crime, it has more teeth in it, and it would go through the district attorney's office.
I guess I'm confused. It says level 1 violation, discharge causing to be discharged any novelties or trick noisemakers or similar fireworks. That's not sparklers are, okay, so sparkling devices level 2. So that is $1,000. And why was it 5,000? Because of the fire danger?
Yeah, under F, violation of this chapter during fire season as declared, during a fire weather warning, but also high fire threat declared by another agency. So we were in fire season, had been declared, and that enhances the fine 1 level, which would put it at $5,000.
And what is your suggestion?
I would suggest anything other than $5,000. I think that was the tough one. And also, You know, I like the ideas and conversation that you guys have had. I think that the judge was able to make that decision to lower it, but he just didn't feel that he wasn't comfortable with that level. And unfortunately, that's all he saw was 4 citations for sparklers coming at $5,000. And he wasn't comfortable with the conditions and lowering them substantially based on them being $5,000. So, you know, I like the idea of $100, lowering it, putting it into a level 1 violation. Again, then you have the enhancement where it could be, and on July 4th, usually we're in fire season by then, so it could be up to $1,000. That would lower it for the events like we had in January when we had those fireworks.
Were all of the fireworks on the beach? I mean, the sparklers on the
I think
beach?
there was one up in the neighborhoods. That's it. The rest were on the beach.
Okay, and what would the fine for reckless be?
It should be $5,250 because it's. a
Okay,
misdemeanor.
so they could get a bigger
Sure.
fine for that.
If they're doing it reckless.
Chief, where it says at the end there, when it bumps up to a higher level, not to exceed $1,000 if it's, you know, an A went to a B. So is the discretion for the judge not to exceed the $1,000, but to, how is that?
It goes down to F there where it says enhances the fine level.
Sure, but it's just by a fine not to exceed $1,000 unless.
Well, yeah, that would be up to the judge.
Okay. So,
It makes it a lot easier not to be on the officers to say, oh, I'm gonna make yours $800. And it just leaves them out of that equation because they shouldn't be making that decision amongst one and the other.
so even though these, as you stated, that the fines were, you know, up to $5,000 and he had the discretion to lower it, he chose not to.
Correct.
Okay.
Because that was the whole discussion we had over the winter regarding the different enhancements that would go in front of the judge based on the conditions and the environment.
And unfortunately, the one that happened earlier was really more of a violation than
Yeah.
what is happening.
Yeah.
This time.
Okay, that same thing, explain G. A violation may not be enhanced no more than 2 levels. So I don't see anywhere where it could be enhanced 2 levels.
No, it only says it will enhance it 1 level, so that would enhance it to $1,000. There is no way that could be 2 levels.
Enhancement would not be part of if there was a reckless fire. That's a separate charge.
Yep. And anything like that, we would go through circuit court, not a municipal court, just because of, you need to separate it so that they're not getting charged in 2 different courts for the same thing.
I'm disturbed that we lost a judge for this.
Well, I don't understand why he would resign
I think he's ready to
his
leave.
fireworks. Makes sense.
Well,
I think it's kind of a combination. I think he was thinking about it and had to deal with this last year than this year. The violations were less, but the cost was more, and he said, that's kind of what the indication I
Judges use their discretion all the time to adjust.
Yeah.
Is everyone comfortable with moving the sparklers to level 1?
I am, yeah.
Yes.
Does that seem reasonable?
I think so. I think it's a lot easier because a lot of people, and the ones that we dealt with weren't locals who were used to it, even though we had plenty of signage. You know, a lot of people don't think of a sparkler as a firework, you know, because as the mayor said, people put it on birthday cakes.
Where were your signs at the entrances? Because I drove through there. I went to all three entrances and I didn't see any signs.
There's one at both ends of town, a big ODOT sign.
Electric.
Oh, I didn't see them.
They were
And I went there Sunday afternoon. That was Sunday, was July 4th. I think I drove there about Sunday afternoon and I didn't see,
It was right up in front of the Cannon Beach sign.
yeah, I didn't see them. So I was just curious.
Is everybody still comfortable with the dollar amounts in total? I mean, I've always personally felt 5,000 was a bit dramatic, but it gave the message this first year. I don't know if that's something we want to continue with or.
I don't have a problem with the dollar amount. I think that gets the message across real fast.
And we had a lot of success because of that.
We had it was about a couple of weeks after the 4th of July, there were a couple of big booms.
There was one the night after.
Mhm.
You were able to find, was anybody able to find out who?
No, they ran between houses. Actually, the officers they're switching out shifts here. And it was only a couple blocks over. And they got down there within minutes, and the people who had heard it and seen them said, no, they took off between two houses and were gone before it even went off.
Mm. It was an
Pre-planned
M80
it.
for sure.
Yeah.
I was surprised that we only had those few. I thought there would be more afterwards.
When the officers hand out a citation, well, first of all, do they first just give a warning? Or do they immediately,
No, it was zero tolerance this year, so they made the citations.
so they didn't have the discretion, they just had to give it. And does that citation list all this information so that the person receiving it knows it's subject up to?
Yeah. And as I said, I can remember at least on 2 or 3 of them, when they had cited them, they said, well, we saw the signs, we just didn't know that meant sparklers. And so, you know, there's always more education that will be going on. But I think that we did a good job educating all last year and weekend of as well as, you know, they contacted every single fire on the beach to say, hey, just reminder, clean up your fire when you're done and no fireworks are allowed.
Okay, one more question, and maybe you answered it already. But on these, it was up to $5,000. What did the judge tell them? $5,000?
No, the judge, well, after the fact, when he originally did the one in January, he said, I'm gonna drop it. I think he said to $500 and then I'll drop it to $250 if you do community service in your community. And so since then, we created the form that the officers fill out, intoxication level, you know, what their attitude was about it, and the fire hazards in the immediate area, people around, that type of thing as well. And so those were certain boxes that the officers checked immediately after issuing the citation that went along with the citation to the judge to make that decision. And they haven't, I think they're seen later this month by our pro tem judge, Ashley Fliffinger. So we'll see.
So they haven't gone before a judge yet.
Correct.
I can just do a little side thing when we're talking about judges. We will be, want to ask you, but if council wishes, we will do the recruiting. And then generally, I think that you all would do the hiring of the judge. We have an arrangement, I think it might be even be in the code, that when the judge is not available, the city also hires a prosecutor, and the prosecutor will sit as the pro tem. And that's how we're going to be moving forward this month. Is that right, Marty? Yeah. So I don't know when we'll do that process, but
Right.
we still have a judge.
Good to have it.
Where does the prosecutor come from? Is it a county prosecutor?
No, it's a local lawyer.
Does the judge have to be certified, appointed judge, county or state?
The municipal courts, usually it's a local attorney that will do the municipal court judge, and that's how it's been forever, in Clatsop County at least.
So we don't have to go far off to find a judge, local attorney or regional attorney.
Yeah, I think, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but we could subcontract, I think that's the wrong word. But we could have our cases be heard by a county judge or there was somebody else too.
Yeah.
So we have to have the ability for somebody that gets a county or a city ticket to be able to appeal, but it doesn't necessarily have to be us. It can be the county or somebody else.
Does it cost more?
I don't know. I'm sure they're gonna charge us for all of the cases that they get from us. And I don't think that we pay that much to the judge. So I think the rest of those funds possibly stay with the city. All right, Marnie? The funds from tickets and things like that, those stay with the city now?
Yeah, if Clatsop County, sometimes someone's cited in Cannon Beach, but it's sent to Clatsop County. Eventually, they send us funds for that after it's been through their system.
Okay,
There's also, just so you know, there's a traveling judge too that handles cities like Manzanita and Rockaway, or used to be Rockaway. So you can hire a traveling judge.
yeah, but we still have to do the court work, correct? Yeah, so we're still the administrators. And then it's just a difference of who sits up here or if we send violators someplace else.
Okay, I guess that's interesting. Got this
Thank you.
direction, change
Yeah,
that.
I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Last week I had this in the hopper, but I didn't have it ready for you yet. And so I wanted to give you guys a rundown on our earthquake that happened in Alaska and to give you some education on how we do a few things around here. Okay. So I put in your packets, and I also was very excited that we're going to be talking some acronyms. So I put on my FEMA shirt today. Believe it or not, that document that I sent you guys comes out of a multi-page book, and I was able to get the parts out of the book that are relevant to descriptions of how this works in a 3-page document. So as long as it seems like it is, it's as short as it possibly can be to describe some of the things, the way this works. Out here on the coast, we don't usually experience a lot of these things because we don't have that many incidents that come down to where we have a warnings. If you were in Florida or if you're in the Midwest with tornadoes, you'd be experiencing this all the time. So as we look at that first document, it's the IPAWS. It's basically the IPAWS, the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. And these capabilities need to be defined because people always say, well, how do we get notified? How does this happen? Well, this is how it works. This is a government, essentially superstructure around all the communication systems in the country. And they go with federal, state, and local territories. And they basically push the emergency alert system, the wireless alert system, which goes to all of our wireless devices. It goes through NOAA radio, and it also does unique and future technologies. The unique and future technologies is the part that we control locally here. And it's the part that we can make happen. It's kind of working, right? I think he does. Did you guys get a chance to read that document? Did you want me to review it more thoroughly? Those 3 pages? No? Okay. The last page, when it comes down to the document, really comes down to the parts that we have control over. When I talk about CLATSUP alerts and using Everbridge on page 3, that's the future technology parts that we use here to notify people locally that the county emergency manager can also take control over and utilize. The benefit of using that system for us is the state, after last year's wildfire incident that happened, they were very disappointed with the alerting system throughout the state, and they were not using this system. They've now adopted the Everbridge system for the entire state, which supports what we're doing. So we're in a really good spot for that. And then things that we've already had in place were like Nixle, which is already a reverse 911 that we have control over in the city, but we also have it in the county. So those are the things that reach out, and we can have a small weather event that would not have an IPAWS activation. And we could say, hey, watch out for king tides on Tuesday, whenever that happens. And we can do a localized alert, and we're using that localized system. So there's federal abilities to do it, state abilities, and then local abilities to make these notifications happen. The important thing to know with that is, as we go through this incident, and I take you through what happened over a 3-hour period of time, it'll kind of make sense as we read all the bulletins. So let's get down to the review part of this incident. So 8.2 earthquake, when you guys asked me last week, is an 8.2 a big deal? 8.2 is a big deal. And on July 28th of this last month, it happened at 11:16 in the evening. The preliminary report had the earthquake rip at 11 miles deep, and it was an 8.1, and it was reclassified very quickly at 20 miles deep at an 8.2. And that's a big difference. And the depth of it is also significant. The depth of that rip of that fault was significant on why certain things did or did not happen. And then parts of the Alaska and Aleutian Islands were put under a tsunami warning. And this, what you see right there in that picture, is exactly what they had figured out through NOAA of how long it would take for that wave to move across the entire Pacific Ocean. So warnings and advisories, watches and informations. We are fairly comfortable with this, but believe it or not, these terminologies are used for everything from a wind event to a tsunami. And they're not all exactly the same, but they're very important for us to know. So as we look at this first bulletin that went out from NOAA, it said tsunami warning, and it had 10:21 p.m. And I'm going to explain a few things about how they put the times in here, just so when you see them in the future, they'll make sense to you. The tsunami warning is the top of the warning scale. It's dangerous coastal flooding warnings and move to high ground. And South Alaska and Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian Islands were put underneath the warning. There happened to be two biologists on one of those islands out there, and they were by themselves with nobody around. And they received this warning. Of course, they felt the earthquake shaking, and they ran out of their hut. And I'm going to share that document with you guys in the future. I have a great article that somebody sent me. They had an advisory, which is the second one down: strong currents and waves, stay out of the water and away from beaches. And that was Southeast Alaska and parts of the peninsula and the Aleutians in other locations. And it says right there, North America level of danger will be evaluated. See how on the very end of that statement, it says right there that they were continually evaluating, but there was nothing that was going to happen at that exact time. So preliminary assessments, when they start assessing this, and we're reading these bulletins, the one thing I want to have you guys pay attention to is initially the magnitude was 8.1, and they got the origin time. When they send these alerts out, they send them out in all different time zones. So AKDT, which is Alaska Daylight Time, PT Pacific Time, Pacific Mountain Time is PMT, and then UTC is Standard Time. It's Coordinated Universal Time. And that's why you see some of those things and it looks like, well, when did this happen? And you have to just realize they send them out to everybody, and some of the alerts come up for specific areas, so they can be confusing to you when you see it. Like, well, when did this happen? So try to pay attention to those standards of times when they come in, and then it gives you a coordinated effort of where it happened, who's involved with it, and then it's going to give you an activity forecast. As you see down there, it shows at the top of the one in Alaska, Sandpoint, It's got all those areas that are immediately going to be affected. And then it gets updated. And sometimes they get updated right away. And this was kind of unnerving when it went from an 8.1 to an 8.2 and it was 20 miles deep. And I couldn't tell if it was an aftershock or a different earthquake. And I'm watching this going, oh my goodness, where are we going with this? And then I started sending out some alerts, but we still were not in any kind of a danger at that time. There was nothing for the West Coast, but it was curious and it was big and it's significant. So as we get to these, and did I mention that Hawaii immediately got put on a watch? That happened right off the bat. So these other areas in Alaska were put on the warnings and they got put on a watch right away. The impacts and forecasts of what's going to happen there are all done by these buoys that are out in the water, and they constantly reevaluate these earthquakes when they happen. And the one thing that's interesting about it, if you look at the second page there, they give you an estimated forecast of the size of the tsunami and when is it going to hit. And you can see that in the right one there. And that's very important because that gives us time frames. That tells us when this distant tsunami can hit us, what's the expected time frame and expected size of the wave that's hitting these buoys that are out there. And then that is going to get us to move into a certain direction. So as we get to more bulletins that start coming down, this shows you bulletin number 4 and bulletin number 7. And it still shows you, and these come in every 30 minutes. So they're updating us every 30 minutes. And if they keep happening quicker than that, then there's something else happening, like I had mentioned before. But these warnings remain in effect for these certain areas. At that time, that's when you can keep advising people where they need to be and where they need to go. And then on the bulletin number 7, it shows you that the tsunami advisory is canceled. And it also shows on the lower right-hand corner of that, what size wave actually came in at what time and what location was measured at. And as you see, it's significantly small. They were extremely lucky and so were we. And as we go through this a little bit more, it'll kind of put it in perspective. So as we get into this snapshot here, all of the 7, and as you're watching the NOAA, and I'm sure all of you guys have been on this website to see this, it'll show you everything as it stacks up. So you can be late to the game and you can see the track record that's constantly running. So you don't have to figure out, well, what happened then and what happened where. It'll show you where it happened and it'll keep a running total of what happens. Sometimes these go off so often that it's kind of surprising, and it is routine. Some of this is routine. The size of this is not routine. So as I gave you guys the emergency operation guideline for tsunami and earthquake, when Nancy asked me a little over a year ago, where's our emergency action plan? Well, our emergency action plans over 400 pages. No one's read it, but we have emergency action guidelines that I'm creating, and I've already drafted 4 of them. I'm going to draft a total of 8 of them. And this was the first one I drafted last year. Last year, we went through this earthquake tsunami guideline, and I had a couple of the counselors come in and we ran through the after action of that previous earthquake that happened in Alaska. You guys remember that when we had a chance to do that? And we walked through how we would handle that emergency. So on the last page of the guideline, as it takes us through what a distant tsunami is or a distant earthquake would be and what a local Cascadia event would happen. And it goes through the warnings, the advisories, the watches, and the information statements. It also gives directions to the community. The guidelines that I create are not just for staff and council, they are for the citizens. And when we start having an opportunity to meet in public and describe them and put them out, it's a chance for them to see what we're doing and what they should be doing. It gives them basic directions. When you get to the last page of that document, it also says what we're accountable for in the city. And then it goes through what police and fire staff and then what the emergency volunteers should be doing. It gives them a basic guideline of the tasks they should be starting and where they should be moving through the exercise. And it also describes what I'm doing. Am I contacting county EOC? Am I contacting and gearing up the emergency operations center and starting an operational period? Am I giving out updates at that time? Am I communicating with the state? Do we have any infrastructure damage in the city? Are we going around and are we doing a triage of the city and finding out how much damage has happened? Getting accountability of all the people that are at the assembly sites or who's not there. That's what we're doing in all those moments. And this is what this guideline is for. It's an operational guideline of how to handle that moment. Did you guys have any questions about the guideline itself? Okay. I have guidelines for fire evacuation. I have guidelines for weather emergencies, including everything from what we're handling right now to severe weather events of wind and rain and storms. I have one for terrorist attacks and also flooding and a few other little ones that are relevant, but they're kind of the same as what we're dealing with right now. So let's talk a little bit more about this earthquake in general. This one specifically that you guys asked the question. This 8.2 Alaska earthquake was the strongest U.S. earthquake in 50 years. It's the 8th strongest quake in U.S. history among the 50 largest quakes worldwide. And it's the top 10 strongest earthquake on U.S. earthquake on record. That's significant. The one on the very top is the one that some of you in the room are familiar with, and that was the 9.2 magnitude of Prince William Sound, and that was March 27th, 1964. When you look at this list of U.S. earthquakes and you get the top 10, look at where they're all coming from. And Alaska, and they do cause damage and they are significant, but this one was a big one. And it's interesting when you look at this and you look at 50 years and this was a significant event. And then what happened? Not very much, but look at how many things are in place in the country compared to 50 years ago to alert us, to prepare us, to get us ready to move forward and survive these events. Quite a bit's happened. A few notable earthquakes in history is when you look at some of these, of the biggest ones in history, let me change that right there. You look at the 9.1 to 9.3 magnitude of the Indian Ocean in December 26, 2004. That one killed 227,000 people. 9.2 earthquake in Alaska, June 11th, 1585. And then you have the Prince William Sound at 9.2 in 1964. Our Cascadia event that happened in January 26 of 1700, that was a 9.2. And then in 2011, you had a 9.1 in Japan. And then you look at these other ones that happened, 7.9 magnitude San Francisco, 1906. 6.9 in Loma Prieta in October 17th, 1989. If you just look at how far we've come with technology and how we're preparing ourselves since those times, it's pretty significant. But these events are pretty interesting. And I didn't know if you would have a question for me about those and how they fit into history or how this one does, but I was hoping to jog your, get your curiosity, kind of where does this all fit into things? That's about all I have on the earthquake itself.
I have a question on on the plan about once an earthquake happens, everybody goes to the operations center, the emergency operations center in the Public Works Department. How many people could fit into that?
Not very many. You have to realize that's a temporary location that we have. That place is got the lights on. That can keep us going. That'll keep us moving. That'll get overrun really quick if we have a major incident, major operation. That's one good reason why we have coaster construction up there as a fallback position to where we can start putting people and start being organized. But the Public Works is not really an adequate EOC, but it is effective.
I think I saw the whole thing and it's not as big as our kitchen,
Nope,
about half that size,
that's right.
roughly. Not gonna put a lot of people in there.
Yeah, it's just something that we can function out of. It's out of the real dangerous tsunami zone. It has what we need to get moving and start communicating and start organizing. And it's just basically a command post with very pretty doors.
Which is one reason why we need an adequate emergency operations center.
We absolutely do. Any other questions?
Back to that slide that showed how many earthquakes have been in Alaska.
Right there.
That was over a period of time. Okay, it covered quite a long time.
That's over 50 years.
There's what, 9 of them in 50 years,
It's a lot.
not every 10 years. I mean, every 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, most of them get generated from that location though.
And the one in 1700, that started here, didn't it?
Yeah, that was the Cascadia rip.
And that started here and went to Japan.
Correct.
That's how they were able to date it.
Right.
Yes. But it shows you the magnitude of the sizes. So when people talk about a 6.0 versus an 8, and you guys are comfortable with the fact that those numbers are big and how much more damage. But when an 8.2 hits, it's something that's going to pique our attention.
Wasn't it true of going from an 8 to a 9? A 9 is 10 times as powerful as an 8.
That's correct.
8 is 10 times as powerful as a 7.
That's correct.
Logarithmic.
How much damage did this last earthquake cause? And
Not very much. It was less than a foot and a half of swell on the of an actual tidal wave type. And the article that I read from the scientists that were on the island, their little shack was intact, but everything was rattled, and they were able to get out. They felt it. They were able to grab their go bags. And they were able to get out of there and go to high ground, and nothing happened to them. And it wasn't that much damage. There was some natural damage with rock slides and stuff like that, but nothing significant. But there's also nobody up there in those areas.
Also, there's
11 miles underground.
And it was 20 miles underground, which made
Yeah.
a big impact on the amount of energy that actually got and did something.
one of the things with a cascade is you're going to get a drop. And that's what's going to move the water. But 20 miles down, you don't necessarily get that. And Rick, I don't know if we could say that most of the earthquakes are going to come from Alaska. I mean, we don't know.
We don't know that. We just look at the track record of the US earthquakes and, in the past 50 years, a lot of the big ones have come from
Right.
Alaska.
Right.
It could happen anywhere.
Right.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. And Rick does a good job with this stuff. I mean.
Yeah.
Middle of the night, all of a sudden we're getting texts and telling where to go. And he's on it for a lot of different, threats.
I think it's great condensing it to where people will actually read it and then having chapters for each type of event. Gonna make it so much simpler for people to grab it and
And that will be what we'll train on. We'll train on those little elements. Like just the other day, several months ago, I realized we don't have any air conditioners for any cooling centers, which doesn't affect us very much. But when this ramped up again, the first thing I did was buy them because I know we don't have them. And that would be in a guideline. If you have a guideline out there and you can see through that, someone's going to pick that up. If you have a huge operational plan, they can't see it. So it really gives you visibility of the small little things that you're missing.
how prepared are we for an emergency and a natural disaster here? I mean, we've been talking a lot about whether or not we have the emergency services funded and available. What is your opinion about that?
Loaded question.
Of course.
I think we have the right attitude. Let's just say that.
Mhm.
We have a long way to go. We haven't been preparing in this city for all of these different events. Since I've been here, we've always been preparing for the Cascadia event, but look at how many other events have happened since I've been here, and that we have a heightened awareness of these things. So if we get good at these things that are kind of routine that can happen, those are the things that we need to really get good at it. And we weren't doing that before certain things happened. And so I think we're much more prepared than we have been in the past, and we're moving in the right direction. And our attitudes, community-wise and city-wise, is perfect to make it happen. But there's a lot of infrastructure things that need to be put in place to make this really resilient. So we have a little ways to go.
I would say that, people think that the event is right when it happens, and it goes on for a year while everybody's rebuilding and all those kind of things. And the way that we're equipped now, and assuming that this structure would not be here, I would say that after a year, we might get a D, probably an F. Because we're not in it for the long term and for the ability for us to coordinate, we're not set up for it. And so it's, face-to-face contact and, walking over debris and all that until we can finally organize ourselves.
We're trying to reach our neighbors in our south and north part of our community, and that wasn't happening a lot. Even with them, they weren't doing that very much either, reaching up to this community and trying to coordinate, be all together on the same page. So those are the kind of things that I think that we're making big strides on, but we have a ways to go. And I think even Oregon is behind the power curve. If you saw what happened last year with the wildfires and how that was handled, and it's kind of a shock for them, like, oh my gosh, we're not ready. And that's fire. Everybody knows these other things can be a little bit more drastic. And so we just have a long ways to go, but I think we're we're focused on that mission. Anything else?
Good, thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Camera looking.
Turn it over to Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. What this is about is a discussion regarding cameras. Last month, I believe we talked about different cameras in the city protecting city assets, city buildings, that type of thing. Like up at Public Works and the Water Treatment Center. One of the things that I wanted to work on as part of our police transparency is talking with you guys about the idea of putting them at certain intersections in town where we have certain issues. One of the main issues that comes up is the traffic study that we're doing. We're constantly monitoring and paying companies to come in and give us a view or video of the areas that we're researching. This is certainly something we could do throughout the year, monitoring the cameras. And it wouldn't be something where it would be facial recognition software. You know, we're trying to be completely transparent, but also keep our eyes in different areas when we have one officer on, where if it's a missing person or a missing child in the downtown area, we could have our admin assistant who's working at the computer to monitor the downtown area for somebody that we're looking for. But on top of that, the incidents that we have downtown, whether it's a hit and run. Unfortunately, last winter, we had a sexual assault that happened once the bars closed, and we had no idea where they went, and they had no idea where they went. And we spent many hours downtown trying to check with businesses that would possibly have a camera face out towards the street so we could put two and two together, and it just didn't work out. And so I think our main priority is areas like the skate park, where we have a lot of liability there if people were to fall and hurt themselves, being able to see what exactly happened there, but also damage, criminal mischief, and graffiti that happens in those areas constantly. And then areas like Second and Hemlock and Second and Spruce, those major intersections downtown, so that we can monitor if something were to happen. If we're looking for a vehicle description, that's how we located our armed robber back in 2013, was with our in-car cameras. But with one officer on, you can't be everywhere at once. And so this is just one way that we would be able to have another tool to help the officers that are working to go back and either find a theft suspect from something that happened downtown, based on a clothing description, that type of thing, what direction they went or what vehicle they were associated with.
And what Jason opened up saying, you know, we're not doing facial recognition, we're not looking for anybody. But we do have a gap if something happens that we don't have a lot of cameras downtown that we can, you know, get information from private sector. So we think it'll be an improvement, but we don't want people to think that we're trying to become Big Brother.
So if you didn't have facial recognition and you're looking for a lost child or a lost adult, is it based on the clothing description then?
Yeah, because that's one of the biggest things we're always looking for is, you know, what were they last seen wearing? Because otherwise people stick out or you can't find them. You know, it's a needle in a haystack. And having some general identifiers, height, you know, what vehicle they may be headed to or associated with, but clothing, hairstyle, length, there's so many different options now.
Have you coordinated with the businesses to a degree as far as cameras they might have?
We've always tried to work with the businesses and encourage the business owners, you know, to get a camera when they're having incidents. And there are several now that do have cameras, but they only face inside their store. They don't have the interest of what's going on out in the street. And, you know, one thing that we run into is, and in fact, I was just talking with Jenny today, is that she's had a few citations recently for people almost getting hit in the crosswalks down there. And those are the ones that happen, and we're not down there to see right when it happens to find out what exactly happened and why it happened.
There was a fender bender at First and Hemlock last weekend that could have benefited from having a camera on it, just to help everybody stayed put and all that kind of stuff, but they didn't have to. If we'd had a camera on it, as soon as the officer got on site, he could have cleared the street. So it just turned into one big solid parking lot for quite a while there.
Yeah,
And he would have been confident then to have had that information, I think.
Yeah.
So we could have moved the cars.
because it's something, we'll be able to link them to our phones, our work phones, or our iPads in the car. So say we're down at Televana and something comes out, we can immediately get on there.
That was something else I was going to ask. Would it be live? Could you say, okay, I'm down here, I need to check and, oh, cool.
Yeah, no, it works out well for me at home because we have the cameras outside the PD and in the parking lot. And with lifeguards and bike aids, they set the alarm off, not knowing. And so I get called at home multiple times and I can just look at the camera and say, okay, it's somebody I know. No need to be alarmed, but yeah.
Okay.
Jason, if I recall the presentation that Rusty did, this is probably higher quality pictures
Yeah,
than what you would think you would get out of a store or, something even a couple of generations ago. So this is much better for being able to view.
But it doesn't read license plates.
no.
Okay.
But then it would have the ability to retain, so it records for a certain amount of time or just.
Yeah, no, I don't remember.
30 days.
30 days, yeah.
Wow.
And you can actually, if we have an incident, we can save it forever and then go back to it and look at it for evidentiary purposes. But that way we lock it down before it fades away.
So the policy question we wanted to come to you is, are you okay with installing them like at Second and Hemlock and a couple of downtown locations? We've already installed them at some city facilities, which we've had issues with.
And Hemlock and Sunset here, which is
I was
such a
thinking,
traffic
thinking
thing.
that one.
Okay.
Jason, where would they be located?
Either, well, they'd have to be on a city pole, I know down at the city park, we would have areas that are city poles, but we'd have to locate an area where they'd be elevated.
Do we have to put any poles in
That I
in
don't
order
know
to do what
yet.
you'd like to do?
Usually,
Not sure.
I thought we had talked about different areas downtown with Rusty, but I can't remember specifically.
Would you be willing to work with private property owners?
Oh, sure.
To try
Yeah.
and,
And Karen,
That'd be something we'd have to run by, obviously, Ashley.
yeah, for Karen, for something like this, phone company, power company, they will work with us for polls to that sort of thing. So we've got some other possibilities. Okay, thanks. We just need to go ahead.
I have no problem with it. There's obviously pinpointing the sites. I think we probably should see a list on that at some point. Just so we know kind of what we're looking at. Not necessarily the municipal buildings,
Sure.
the public site.
I think on September 7th, the plan is to come with budget adjustments, and we can also bring back a little narrower location of where they would be.
Just general, you don't need the,
Sure.
this is the inches above the pole, it's how it gotta be or something like that, yeah. But, this is first and second, or Bruce and Hemlock or something.
How many do you think you'll need
These ones, I think, just an additional would be one at
for?
Second and Spruce, one at Second Hemlock, one at the skate park area, and then one over here.
What about first?
First, we've got Sam back there.
Sam's out there. Yeah.
You got a door. I just told you he witnessed something. I'm bringing him into court.
As soon as you find a judge.
No, we certainly could look at that intersection because that's a hairy intersection there too.
Terrible intersection.
There was 3 close calls today. There's always close calls. But that's the first fender bender. I didn't see it, but I heard it.
So we'll look at that and see, and maybe we'll
Yeah.
suggest that on the 7th as well.
It's just awkward because of that downhill speed.
Exactly.
with the curve. Downhill and a curve. I know an officer is not sitting at the top of the hill like he was all through spring.
On Washington.
Yeah, he was catching straight and left. there.
He's on graveyard now, that's why.
Oh,
Yes.
you know his name.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Chief. Transportation system. You want cameras too?
You know, it can help me find my wife's glasses. That's what she's. Help.
Or cell phone. Mine's a cell phone.
Are you doing the, Uh-huh. oh, yeah? Rick didn't use the clicker? Oh, no, you can use the clicker. I'll use the clicker. That's okay.
You went all out, Jeff.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right, thank you. I just wanted to bring before you some more information that we've got, some of the feedback from the parking survey. All of this is going to be up on the internet. In fact, this is already, I'll put this presentation, I think this is even up now. But we've got the parking survey results, the original transportation system survey results will be up next week. We'll also have the existing condition reports up there on the website, and you can always find it at cannonbeachtsp.com. And if you haven't been there lately, like I said, we've got a bunch of new reports, more to come. We've set the date no T in there.
Right.
Right. Misspelling in the TSP. So anyhow.
You misspelled TSP.
It should be.
You got 2 out of 3 of the letters wrong.
Most of it, yeah.
We'll correct that in the results, but so we'll have that up, and then also we've set the date in September. That'll be up there next week as well for the next round of public meetings, which we're hoping to do. We're keeping our fingers crossed alive. And so I just wanted to briefly run down some of the highlights that came out of this. And then all of this, like I said, will be on the internet. If you want to dig into the data, I'll actually have all of the raw data out there as well. So you can look through without the names and anything or emails as part of it. But as you know, part of the parking survey, I mean, the reason we did it is we got such a huge turnout in the transportation system survey that, you know, parking was the elephant in the room. And so we said, well, let's just do a parking only kind of survey. And we decided to target at the residents, employee, business, and visitor, different segments where you could self-identify into those and go into answer those questions. So in the first ones of the resident surveys, we asked you, which of the following describes you best? And this is the breakdown here of what we got back. Around 40% or so was there in the Midtown presidential areas, but a pretty good, spectrum there of all of our different areas took the survey. I'm just, as you can see from the question over there, I'm just picking out certain ones that I'm highlighting. But like I said, all of them out there and available in the reports. So where do you typically park when visiting downtown or Midtown? As you can see from our residents, pretty good split between walking, parking on street and off street. And for those people that don't know, on street parking is that where you gotta often parallel park, everyone's favorite, in the right of way. Off street are those lots that can be either private parking lots or public parking lots. Where do you believe downtown, Midtown employees parking? So each one of those resident, visitor, the 4 different had some unique questions that were targeted towards those kind of audiences. So where do you believe downtown, Midtown employees park? You can see there's kind of a split between on street and off street for the employees. where do you think employees should park? However, elicited a much different response. Most people want to see those parking off-street. 10, where do you believe most visitors to downtown park? Most people think they park almost 80% there on street. Where do you think visitors should park? A fair mix, but 60% majority off-street. So I think what we're seeing is we want to see more people from the residents' perspective park off-street. This is just a listening portion of our outreach. You know, we're asking those questions, listening to the answers. Next 2 steps will be coming up with different solutions and then getting feedback from the audience or from the public on, you know, how they feel about those different solutions and scenarios. So assuming an improved parking system, what changes would make the system more usable, effective? And so, as you can see, those responses from the residents, pretty clear that they want to see, or a good majority would like to see remote lots or consider remote lots as one of the questions. Shuttle services, parking enforcement, employee permits are all up there in the preferred system solutions. And then that final question on each one of the surveys, additional comments, suggestion, insights. I beg all of you to read through those. I mean, just some great ideas coming out of these thoughts and solutions. And I broke them down to each one of the different groups so you can see each one from the residents to the visitors. These are the word clouds, and I'll put these out there as well. You know, the major words that came out of the various suggestions and things like that. So employee parking survey says, which of the following describes you best? Mostly downtown employees, but a pretty good Midtown employee working group. Which of the following describes you best? A Cannon Beach resident, Seaside resident, other Clatsop County area resident, Tillamook County resident, and other. As you can see, quite a few either come from Seaside or the Clatsop or from further afield. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of look at, okay, so where can you move that window down, Trevor? Yeah, move that down just a little. Okay, yeah. So what doesn't work well and what works well? So this is kind of weighing question 2 versus question 3 in the employees. What elements of our parking system work well and which don't work well? As you can see, the majority don't think any of it really works that well. Signage, probably the best. Okay, as an employee, where do you typically park? And they say 60% of them say off street. And if you'll remember what the residents said, it's where we want them to park. As an employee, where do you prefer to park? Off street. So they prefer to park off street. But do they, or, you know, can they? Those are the questions we ask in the next few portions of our survey TSP project. Assuming an improved parking system for the employees, what changes would you make the system more friendly, usable, and effective? Majority employee permit. So an employee permit type of, as you can see, parking lots, and then shuttle service that accommodates that. So those tie pretty neatly together. And then if you look at the employee parking surveys, I mean, if you look at just some of these comments, and this is just straight data coming at you here, but if you just read those first ones there, it shows you the depth that some of these people put into their thoughts and their opinions. And I think that's worth the survey in itself. So if you get an opportunity, look at those, and I'm sure we'll be discussing those when we talk about the solutions and everything, because these will inform some of those solutions that we'll propose to you guys. Business parking survey. So these are for business owners. It was pretty much targeted at the business owners. Which of the following describes you best? Downtown business owners in the majority, Midtown. probably a pretty good mix right there of what number wise our our businesses are. And then which of the following describes you best? Cannon Beach residents, Seaside resident, Clatsop County resident. So good portion coming from the outside the area. I'd say that's a pretty good spread. Which do they think doesn't work well and work well? They are okay with on-street parking for the customers. But other than that, they all could use some work. Where do you think your employees park? And so that's a pretty good mix. They think, pretty split. Where do you think your neighbors' businesses? That's one of my favorite.
That's the truth right there.
Yes, that's my favorite, It's kind of like the Garrison Keeler, everyone thinks above average, right? Okay. Where do you think your patrons park? And where do you think they should park? So that's some good information for us and as we see in perceptions and what we think and how they actually play out. How interested would you be in a program that allows businesses to expand operations and pay for off-site parking rather than on-site parking? So the vast majority were either unsure, you don't know. So that's about equal with the very interested and interested. So that's something we should explore, at least from the business owner's perspective. They'd like to see that explored. Assuming an improved parking system, what changes would make the system more friendly, usable, and effective? And these are business owners. They would like to see a paid parking system and then followed there fairly closely by most of the others, but employee permits and time restrictions, all those kind of blend over, but nothing really sticks out except for that paid parking area. And then a few sidewalks, visitors should have off-street parking, time parking, and so it goes on and on. And like I said, feel free to read through those. And visitor parking survey says, which of the following describes you best? And so I think this is great that we at least separated those out and asked visitors to also comment. But you can see a lot of them, quite a spread of different types there. I'd like to see, personally, as a data person, I'd like to see 100 at least of every category. But I think this is pretty good that we got at least 50 from the visitors.
Jeff, what is a second home guest?
So a lot of people come and they stay and, like a visitor, guest of someone that owns a second home. And so they're there being part of, just it's their second home. It's not the major residence or primary residence is over in Portland. So they come over and they're either there as a second home, owner or as a guest of the second home owner.
Okay, so that's different than the short-term rental.
Right, exactly, yeah. So which of the following describes you best? Visiting from Portland Metro, visiting from Oregon, Seattle Metro area, visiting from Washington, visiting from the US, or international guest? No international guests on this survey, but a pretty good selection from all over in the rest, and good to see that. And they probably are the most positive of anyone. They think the system works fairly well compared to most of the others. But as you can see, they thought the no time restriction and legible signs and everything was okay. Where do you prefer to park when visiting downtown? They would prefer to park off street. Assuming an improved parking system to make it sound friendly, which do they prefer? Shuttle service, customer visitor only lots, and remote lots. So they'd like to see some remote lots and offsite parking. And the visitor parking surveys, one of the things, multi-level parking, shuttle parking, and you really see some very creative and often in each one of these comparisons to other areas and how they do that. Another great thing to see from whether it's residents that have been to other areas, but the visitors really kind of show different areas as well and other systems that work, management systems. So totals, parking survey says, so if we're looking at the total respondents, 58% were residents that responded to our survey. 20% were visitors, and then the others. And you can see how well is parking in Cannon Beach working for your particular interest. And you can see the vast majority say adequate or insufficient. Gross, so where it says gross, that's just the sheer number of responses for, so what elements of the parking system work well. And you can see there for residents, how that breaks out, employees, business and visitors. And then as a percentage of the 100% total, you can see how those then break out. And that's what that net total means, is that 100% kind of look at. And what element of the park system do not work well, and the same with that. So you can kind of compare those and contrast which ones from the residents to the employees, the different respondents segments, which ones they feel are working better or worse than others. And there that is in the comparison of the aggregate or the total, all of them together. And you can see not thinking it's working that well. Who should be the priority user for on-street parking in a constrained? Most of them think that for the on-street parking, customers and visitors are that, and then you can weigh them and see how they work against the different classes there. Same with the priority users for off-street. Who should be using the off-street parking? Employees. And then assumed an improved parking system, what changes would make to the more. So mainly when you look across all of the surveys, I think it's great response. We're glad we got, the 250 respondents. It's been great feedback. Like I said, if you dig into the details and look at some of that, it's been a quick summary. But what I was most impressed with, you hear people daily complain to at least the two of us about parking, and it's this. But if you read the actual opinions and summarize, they don't think the system's working well, but all of the responses, I mean, there's complaints about, hey, not a good survey, or, but most of them say, thank you for asking. And here are some solutions that we think will work. And so I think that that's a great way to start these next steps as we go into September. The next round will be looking at our existing conditions, where that feeds out, and then start looking at the solutions that are out there and start to modeling those. How will they affect transportation and parking? So thank you guys for, and I'll respond, hopefully. I think I did it again, but anyhow, CannonBeachTSP.com, please visit the site. And if you're not on our kind of follow our site, then please sign up for that. Any questions or any thoughts?
I think it's interesting that after all the people that came to scream and yell at us when we were doing the parking survey and talked about 3-hour time limit, now they're saying, oh yeah, let's do paid parking.
Yeah.
Time restrictions. And what is the, it just seems kind of ironic that now they're all supporting it. Not all, but a lot of them.
Not everyone.
Not everyone.
Exactly.
A lot of them.
And I think that's something that you get from surveys, though, is the people that come in your room are not those same people.
Mhm.
And so that's why you do a survey, and especially when you do a truly controlled surveys, and that's the the best you can do, but this is a great survey. It gives you that information that not everyone feels that way, and they believe that there are solutions out there. We just got to take a chance and try some of them. So thank you, guys, and
Nice job, Gus.
I'll be back next month. Yeah.
The next step is doing some public presentation.
Yeah, so September, I think it's 14th or 15th. We will announce it next week, those dates and everything and times. Our next also packed meeting, but then also an open house where hopefully I'll have it live and in person. Okay,
Thank you for doing that. That's
thank you all.
good stuff.
It's nice work. Thanks, man. Okay. Next item, Ken Beach Elementary Construction Delivery Proposal. Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We had this discussion once during I think it was good of the order. And I talked about the construction manager, general contractor, and there seemed to be consensus to go in that direction. When I started talking to Ashley, she said that we actually, or you actually have to take a specific action saying that we are directing staff to do construction management, general contractor. And that there would be findings of fact, and that it would be done, if ultimately in a resolution. And so what I'd like to do is go through, and we can skip some of these slides. Let's get this one. We have to essentially do a resolution, a presentation. Some of it is here. Talk about the project, the status of the project, contracting options, which would be hard bid versus construction manager or general contractor, and then talk about the reason staff is considering the CMGC contracting method. Next. The purpose of the project, you all are very familiar with. It's to repurpose or rejuvenate the existing school. And that's to expand the ability of lodging establishments, et cetera, to improve their ability to go ahead and attract meetings and to act as a community gathering spot. Also to focus on the tourist and opportunity for residents. We have a native village that was on the property for thousands of years, an estuary in which the property is located, which is an amazing site, and the importance of the site to the Lewis and Clark expedition. They're just some examples that we can talk about. Next. That's the inside of the gym, if you haven't seen it. Oh, let me just go ahead and touch on something, Sam. That's what the inside of the gym will look like when they're done, even though they're putting the insulation in. The insulation is related to the energy code, but it'll be sandwiched in between wood and wood. And so it won't change the acoustics. It won't do anything like that. So that's why I put that slide in. Actually, that's not why I put this slide in. Next one, please. That's the exterior. We're going to work on that a little bit. Next one. And the next one. Those are all the buildings that we're talking about working with. We just did an award for the re-roofing and seismic retrofit of the classrooms for the roofing portion. We'll be doing the same type of work for the gym structure. And that will be sometime in spring of 2022. We've had, I don't know how many public sessions regarding the use of the project. And I started to put something together for hiring the architect engineering firm. Didn't realize, what are we trying to set this up for? Is it CMGC or is it hard bid? And so we really couldn't move on until that decision was made. And we've had a little bit of that discussion. Next one. We talked about the hard bid is traditional, where you have somebody do a design, you put it out to bid. Those are good when there's no complex issues or fewer unknowns associated with the project. Hard bids can also be more susceptible to change around projects because the contractor who's building it, the first time he sees the plans is when he picks them up to bid. So the contractor was not involved with anything as far as trying to phase it or the kind of challenges you'll run into. And so without having that extra set of eyes, it can be, hopefully they would catch more things rather than the contractor. Also, and I have to go back and review this, but I don't believe there is an incentive for the CMGC for change orders. A general contractor can make more money with change orders, but the CMGC is paid with a fee. So there's an incentive for them to make sure there are none. Next one. We just talked about the GC, the CMGC. The contractor is hired during the design process, or the person that will be the contractor or the firm. And they're hired shortly after the architects. And then they work side by side with the designers when they're doing the assessment of the building, anything that needs to occur as far as destructive testing or whatever. And they can go through and talk about what the different issues are and then help to provide the material, constructability. There's all kinds of advice they can provide during the design process. Again, there's two phases in the CMGC contract. The first one, they do it for a fee. And the second one, they also do it for a fee. But at the second one, then they're actually separated from the designer at that point, and they are standalone. And then they bid out the subcontracts. And then they go ahead and actually do the job and act as a general contractor moving forward from that point. The city and the CMGC negotiate a guaranteed maximum price as you get further down the line in the design process. And let me see, in acting as the GC, they are the ones that actually deal with the competitive bidding for the subcontracts. But as part of the design team, they are also working with how those packages can be split up, which in a way that they think is most advantageous. Next one. Again, we talked about the CMGC is able to work with the designer collaboratively and try to identify issues before we go to bid. And there can be significant cost savings in materials, constructability, and a better finished project because your builder is involved during the design. CMGC is expected to review the project as part of the design team, so they're aware of the issues and conditions when they go into construction. It's not something that they are going to discover when they first get access to the structures. And so that there's less likely to be claims for unforeseen conditions, which can result in change orders. Next one. There are some project issues that will come into play. Both structures on the site, approximately 60 years old, primarily wood construction, have not been maintained for at least, and there's supposed to be a number there, but I think that is probably going to be 10 to 15 years. They've sat empty for several years. They don't meet the building code seismic requirements at this time. The utility and mechanical systems do not meet code requirements and in fact are not operational. And water damage has been occurring for several years due to the building envelope failure. Next one. The CBE project is a major renovation project for the city. There's a lot of unknowns, as we talked about, with older existing structures that have not been maintained. And the CMGC can evaluate the current building conditions during the design process to address constructability issues. It can also deal with the construction phasing to improve the subcontractor packages, as we talked about a minute ago. And the CMGC process tends to minimize change order, as there's not an incentive for the general contractor after going through the CM process because they're working for a fee. Next one. If we do consider doing the CMGC, staff will draft findings to exempt this project from competitive bidding. The requirements of ORS 279C.355 paren 1 and paren. And that allows us to use CMGC as the process. We will publish public hearing notice 14 days prior to the hearing. The city will hold a public hearing in which the public will have the opportunity to testify about the findings, the proposed process. The proposed findings will be in the form of a resolution, and you will be asked to approve a resolution to proceed with CMGC services. And that'll be through a qualifications-based selection process. Next one.
Any questions or input? Sorry, I raced through this, but we've already talked about it once. And the idea is that we would set this up for September 7th. And that would be the public hearing. And then that's when you'll have the resolution in front of you. It'll detail all of these. All these subjects.
So how much control does or how much oversight does the city have in terms of the fees that are paid to both the designer and the contractor?
There's a certain percent that is, I don't even want to call it traditional or whatever, but it's always going to be a negotiated fee.
Negotiated between the city
The city and the architect and the city and the CMGC. If you're working with the GC, then there's just a hard bid price.
And then and you're talking about negotiation on both phases. Both, you said there were two fees, one for the beginning and one when the contractor takes over. The city would negotiate both of those fees.
They negotiate both of them up front. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to voice my concerns that they're the same as when we discussed this last. Is that, as you pointed out in your slide, that these buildings are very old, haven't been maintained. Is that I just want to make sure we go into this with our eyes open, that there is going to be a very, very likely scenario where the costs are going to be much higher than anticipated. And I'd just like to know how that is addressed with the model that you're advocating for.
I think that you're going, as we get into the design and they find more conditions, I think because the contractor is there, they're going to be able to identify, that this is going to be a major cost issue and bring it to us while we're still in design, as opposed to being surprised at the end because the bid price is high. So I think that is part of it. And also the study that we did said that it was likely to be like 3.7 million. I think we all know that since that study's been done, the prices have gone up for construction. And so we're likely to see that. But also there's a guaranteed maximum price at some point that's provided by the contractor. But I think that there are some caveats associated with that, but you're less likely to have those. And remember, a higher price doesn't help the CM when they're acting as the GC, because their fee has already been set. And so what they're doing is saying, I think this is going to be your top end once we get in and go, through the bidding process. So I think that we'll have more control, we'll have more heads up, when things happen. But I also think that when you have, a high quality contractor or somebody with contractor experience there, when issues are being discussed, that we're in a much better position than if you're just dealing with the design firm.
I agree with that. I just have some very real concerns about the project. And because I certainly don't believe that hiring somebody, to provide a fixed bid is necessarily the best way to go.
And the contracts will address that, but the fee itself, should be set. But I'm sure that there are some instances where, that would be renegotiated under certain conditions or something. But again, you have somebody that's already said, I'll do this for this much. And so they don't want change orders. They don't want more time on the site. And so they're going to do everything that they can to identify those issues up front.
And that's kind of my concern, is that I think there's going to be a lot of change orders due to the condition of the building. And it would be my fear that someone would maybe try to rush through that if they were in a position to, have to work within the set parameters of their fee.
Well, the architect is in that position. And I've not thought that through, but I'm not sure how much better we are if it's a general contractor working from a hard bid. I think that there's, at that point, they get a portion of whatever the change order is. And so there's, potentially a benefit for that.
Mhm.
But also in the price, I'm conservative with these things, and they put a significant contingency in there because of the unknowns. But also they did a pretty good job of, tearing the building apart or both buildings to try to see what kind of conditions they were. So we're going in, kind of with eyes open, and that we already have some information. But to have somebody that's a builder and not just a designer talking about, all right, this is how we're going to do this project, I think it will be helpful.
Okay, thank you very much, Bruce.
Okay.
When you talk about a fee for the CMGC, that's within a set period of time, correct?
Mhm.
Depending on the design that's set forward.
Well, from the time that they start to the time that they do the bids. And then after that, there's another fee for the construction side.
Okay, I'm just curious, because it's the design parameters that are going to establish the timeline.
Mhm.
And so if the fee is structured for the second phase of it to fit, you would have a timeline set. I'm just still trying to rattle this around.
Mhm. I've been involved 4 times with this, and that never became an issue. I mean, I can see where it could become at some point. But I don't recall exactly how the contract's read, but there probably are some things that they're out of control, that there's the possibility to modify.
An example would be what just happened with the roof of the gym. If we couldn't get a certain material for 4 months, what happens to this contractor's fee schedule? Does it just phase into a different timeline or what?
I would think that if there's a critical material that we can't get, we would hope that it would be before the bids, because you're dealing with a contractor, and so they're, knowing what the purchasing situation is all the time. And so we might wait, like we're doing now, to do the gym. Or as part of the design team, they would, be recommending alternatives or ways to, okay, well, we don't install this right now, but we can come back and do this.
I'm just curious.
Mhm. And these are all things that can happen under either bid scenario.
I guess what I'm concerned about is hiring somebody from somewhere else that comes in and says, I'll, do this for this amount of time, but I'm moving away after a certain amount of time. I'm gone. And then we have these time delays, and then what happens to this person that's not here anymore? So,
That's certainly something that could be a negotiation.
Yeah.
To make sure that someone stays with the project.
They're contractually bound to finish the project.
okay,
Won't we require everyone to have a bond posted?
Mhm.
Cover some of those things?
Yeah.
Well, certainly this approach, I think, will address some of the unknowns earlier in the
Mhm.
process. And hopefully by knowing a little earlier, we can come up with better cost estimates.
Mhm.
But there are going to be surprises no matter what.
Right.
This would be so much simpler if we were building from the ground up.
Mhm.
We're going in
Yeah.
trying to make silk purse out of a sow's ear.
Mhm.
And it's gonna, I think my old rule of thumb is gonna take twice as long and cost twice as much is gonna work here.
I don't know if twice as much and twice as long, but I'm pretty confident there's going to be
more than 3.7 that we have in the report.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much. But on the other hand, this is a relatively simple, construction. It's walls and roofs.
Well, that we have.
Some details.
It's not, we have that going for us.
Yeah.
It's not a real complex structure.
Yeah.
It's that unknown factor.
Right.
That's why I think bringing the designer and the contractor on upfront really helps.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good approach, but it's not gonna solve all of our.
It won't solve all the problems, but I think that some of the issues that we're gonna have, like, I don't think anybody knows what the condition of the water lines and the wastewater lines. Well, if it comes down to what are we going to do, I would rather have a contractor make these suggestions than, an architect or even the mechanical engineer, because he's there, or they are there.
We're gonna have to live with it.
Right.
Okay.
So next month.
Yeah, if that's okay, then we will bring the resolution to you.
Yep.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.
I get that good either. Next item, pending for the receptionist clerk.
Yes, Lori and I have been talking for a couple of years that the workload in the finance department is getting greater and greater. We did make an adjustment when the person that was the receptionist, court clerk left. We were able to bring in Marnie, who as the assistant director with the accounting degree and experience. But we still have, there's just some things that are happening as we go along. One of them, we were kind of kidding about the tickets, but in July, we had 308 tickets. And so somebody takes that in, deals with the money, deals with court for any of them that are being appealed, all the way through ultimately to the filing. So that's gotten quite a bit more. One that I did not see necessarily coming when Lori and I were having the discussions was I'm feeling pretty good about the prepared food tax. And if that is approved, it's in November, and then all of a sudden we're at the beginning of January. And we're going to need to set up a system and work through all the details of having that in place for July 1st. It's not insurmountable, but right now we don't have time to do some of the things we're doing. So to go ahead and say that we would have, be able to take that task up and do a good job with it, that makes it a little bit harder. And also Public Works has done, and I think you all would agree, an amazing job on getting us loans and grants and those kind of things for projects. And that's something that they can handle in-house. But once we get to the point that we're going to be doing draws and people are going to be, giving us money and all that, all those things are going to shift to the finance department. And that's a function that they're not providing now. Talked about court. And then also the finance department is the de facto receptionist for the city. Any walk-ins walk in through their doors. The phones ring, they answer the phones. And so whatever they're doing, somebody's got to get up and take care of that interruption. And so by bringing in somebody that would remove the court function, the court responsibilities, and it worked fine last time when we had Samantha, and then also to deal with the receptionist issues, that the 4 people that we have there are extremely capable, and we can go ahead and take care of what these issues are. So I would probably be coming to you next year when we come up for budget. But as I was thinking about it, and again, with the implementation of the prepared food tax, that would be too late because we would be hiring somebody 2-3 months after the food tax is being implemented. So I think that this is inevitable that we would be bringing somebody on, especially with the public works issue and the prepared food tax. And that now is the best time to take that action. And from a cost standpoint, there's a significant range. You see the annual cost of the position would be between $61,400
and 78,900, depending on the health insurance category, they would fall under. The transfer that we would be asking for would be for November through June 30th. And so the range we'd be requesting from this year would be 40,524 to 52,100.
That's assuming the position be filled when?
November, I think.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, from November to June 30th.
Oh, I see, yeah.
So
Is it, and it'll be a full-time?
it'd be a full-time position, and it is the lowest paid position in our pay grade system.
And that includes our contribution to PERS as well.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's 100% funded.
And if the restaurant tax doesn't pass,
We would still need to have somebody there that would be able to deal with the infrastructure projects that we're going to have. And I think the difference might be that well, I don't know. I think we're at the point that we need, again, the position that we're adding is a low-level position. If the PFT comes in and the work that we're talking about with Public Works, that's all would be taken care of by the existing people. And so what we're hiring is somebody to buy time for these folks to do those other functions. So I don't know. I personally think that the Public Works side, the infrastructure, is enough to tip it over to have somebody there to be able to go ahead and handle the phones and do court and all that. And then even more so when you add the PFT portion.
Well, Bruce, I think to your point, aren't we there now?
Yes, sir. We are definitely there now.
And we have no prepared food tax.
Right. Right.
So I think that answers your question, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, we have key people that are ready to leave because of the workload now. And this is something that would solve that problem and solve it for the future.
You know, I think nearly every time I've come in,
Mhm.
hopefully don't take much of their time, but there's always somebody at the counter,
Mhm.
either coming in or just leaving.
Yeah.
And somebody, one of our accounting staff had been addressing, where to get forms, what forms need to be turned in.
Mhm.
Can I park down there or not? All those
I
things.
think that's the one. Can I park in the city 10-minute line or something like that?
So, I don't know how they can get their work done, frankly.
yeah, it's a real distraction. I think we definitely need a reception
Yeah.
person so that they can do their work.
Right. And then it worked. We found it worked out well if they also handled court. So it's really a full-time job.
I was thinking that is a lot, the
Yeah.
court.
Yeah. But we've seen it work before.
And will this job be posted?
Yes.
And you have a job description?
Yeah. It's already in the system.
Okay.
And so with your concurrence, what I'd like to do is bring it to the September 7th meeting to do the budget adjustments that will be necessary for the funding. And we will probably start looking for an applicant right away as far as the advertising, but we won't be doing anything until after September 7th.
Have you already anticipated where those funds will come from?
Yes, I believe Lori said that they're available in the contingency.
Okay.
And that's why we're going to require your action.
Okay. All right.
Any other questions or? Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. So we're good of the order. There's one thing I had just before while we were talking about the old school site. Where are we at with the scope of work? Are we still slowly working on that or?
The decision on the construction delivery, which is the CMGC or the hard bid, the contracts are going to be different based on that. We're working with someone in Beard Elsner that has dealt with this in Forest Grove and some other places, and they have contracts and scopes and things like that. So it should be a pretty quick turnaround once this decision is made. And they've already coordinated the language in those contracts.
Can you tell me anything about the service suspension?
For the bus.
Mhm.
But they don't have enough drivers. And so, and I sent something out. I hope I remembered to put it, you attach it to you folks.
We got it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
But they'll let us know when they have somebody to be able to go ahead and pick it up.
I noticed the bus driving down the street has an electronic sign saying drivers wanted.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't tell you where you're going, but they're just picking up applicants.
So my question was, which route is that?
Yeah.
Is that the Cannon Beach to Seaside?
It's 17. It's the one, yes, the one in here that I think, and I don't know exactly where the routes are. There's one that we have, it's kind of as a shuttle. And then there's one that goes to Seaside.
That's the one that runs during the winter time when we don't have the shuttle running through town, correct?
I don't think so. I think that's the extra one that they put on in the summer in addition to the shuttle
Okay,
because of tourists and because of employees going back and forth from here to Seaside and back.
Boy, in the month we need it. It's now.
What's that?
The month that we need it.
Yeah.
Is now.
Yeah, I think that's the extra one. I'm not sure of that. Kathy's on Zoom. We could ask her.
Yeah, sure.
Kathy, raise your hand. Oh, there she is.
Hi, can you hear me?
Kathy, yes, thank you.
Hi, yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have any latest and greatest updated information for you. I wish I did. The driver shortage, it's affecting all the routes, and operations makes the decisions as to which routes are reduced or the way that is going to impact the service. So I don't have any immediate updates. I can reach out to operations and ask them to contact you if you have any specific questions.
Okay.
And I don't know what the notice was that you received right now. So
Route 17 service suspension.
Yeah, which one is Route 17?
Route 17 is the one that goes through Cannon Beach and basically runs mostly through Cannon Beach, does the loops in Cannon Beach, and does I believe it's twice, every other or every 2 trips into Seaside.
Right, that's the one they've been using the trolley on?
Yes, that is the summer one.
Okay. That's the one we're.
Okay. Sorry. to
Yeah,
interrupt.
they're not suspending a route predicting a loss of drivers. There's a current critical shortage right now.
Okay.
Yeah. I wish I had better news or other news.
That's all right. We were just trying to figure out which route it was.
Thanks, Kathy.
You're welcome. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay,
I have,
we are without our shuttle.
sounds like it.
Mhm.
I have a question. How can we, or have you determined how we can prevent the situation that occurred last week with the sea breeze and the road construction and lack of notification?
That was a situation. It was unfortunate that it happened. I don't recall the last time we had a situation like that because I know Trevor and Karen, they're very proactive. We even, let me see, Daryl calls somebody before you get your water turned off, to make sure you see if he can help you. But we do that a lot. This one was a simple one that we could have,
just a stop by would have been, plenty to go ahead and address this. But I don't think we're going to see it again, but I think if it was to happen again, it would raise my concern level that there's a pattern, but I don't think that there is. And that's why I don't think you've seen a lot of other complaints on this, because especially Public Works is so service oriented. So
But how did it happen this time?
I think that the thought was that the project was small enough that it wasn't going to impact anybody. And it was there, there was where the cut was done, there was still room for somebody to be able to drive in or out. The time it took to park, take the vehicle off of the loader, not the loader, but the trailer. They stayed there, too long and bothered some people. And also, it's not that much to go in and say, hey, tomorrow or the day before, the day after, we're going to be doing a project out here. And you could see from the pictures, it wasn't a huge project, but let people know at the hotels so that they can, say, hey, folks, I'm sorry, but we're going to have a little bit of noise here tomorrow morning, whatever. And so I don't see it. It's not something that I've had to deal with in almost 4 years. Again, it was thought to be a small project, wouldn't be impacting anybody. Obviously it did. And so our awareness is higher, and we've talked to Mike McEwen about, if you're going to be staying here for a little bit of time, make sure you go in and tell them how long you're going to be or where you are, if they need to move it, those kind of things. And we do those all the time, but because from a staff standpoint, we thought it was a smaller project and we didn't take those steps that we should have. We should take it for all of them like that.
Well, I appreciated the email you sent out explaining all the event and the sequence and how you addressed it. So rather than me wondering what's going on and other people hearing about it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
And that's one thing that I've been really impressed with. That, our folks are so proactive when we have projects, and especially when we have something that's going to involve like turning your water off and on and those kind of things. I mean, we're, very proactive with it. Again, this one was such a simple one. I don't know if I would have thought to go ahead and do more than what was done or not. It was.
Well, the problem is, of course, it's the middle of tourist season.
Sure.
Tourists are going wild. Plus, they have a real problem that they voiced with the farmer's market situation and
Right.
parking there. So it's just compounding the problems that they have. So
Right.
I'm concerned about that.
And that'll increase our awareness. And I know that everybody wishes it hadn't happened and we'd handled it differently. But I think the people that are responsible for that stuff do a really good job. I just don't know what happened this time. Okay. We are working with HerbWorks, who's the company that we've hired to help us with the code audit. And we had a meeting with them today. And Marcy McAnally, she's the head of the consultant team. She would like to talk to 2 or 3 people from each one of the boards before the first meeting, which is, I think, the 8th or the 9th that we set up. And so I just wanted to ask, whose name do I give from the council's standpoint?
I wouldn't mind doing it or.
Yeah, any one of us.
How many do you need?
I have jury duty.
Okay, you can just when your cell phone rings in the court, just a second. I think
I
I
know.
If I volunteer, I've been on the planning commission.
Okay.
But Nancy volunteered first, so she.
Well, I tell you, I think most other ones we're doing 2. I think it makes sense to do 3 from council. So
Oh,
if you 3 were the ones that wanted to do it.
Sure.
You live with that, Brandon?
Just fine.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and give those names.
On the planning commission.
Yeah. That conversation will happen in a week or 2. It's coming together well.
And you'd also ask, correct, about a meeting date? Is that,
We will probably get the meeting date out tomorrow. Let me see. We wanted to ask you folks first.
So we didn't find out that we had 2 or 3 counselors that weren't able to make the meeting. So we've had the dates that you folks can do it. Robin, subject to how long her trial is going if she's in court. Now we've sent something out to DRB and the Planning Commission said, we've got these 2 and we're glad we have 2 to offer them. Which ones can you make it? And I don't think that we can accommodate everybody's schedule. We got like 18, 20 people. And so I think the way I'm looking at it is that I'm trying to get the council there and then say, these are the dates and some of them will make it and some of them won't. But to try to get a date that 20 people can make or 18 people or something like that's going to be tough.
Okay.
And we have we've asked you for a second date, and the second date, it's kind of crazy with some of the advertising requirements and things. If we are going to make a change, like we talked about some items that might be on like an expedited list. If we're going to make those kind of changes, we have to get them to DLCC, I think it is, 20 days in advance. And so if we have a meeting on the 8th, 9th, or 10th, or whatever day is likely to come up, and we have very little time to be able to go ahead and have a second meeting later in September. So what we've decided is that we will have the next, let me see. We want to allow time to have a meeting between the one that we're having and then the one that we would take things potentially to the Planning Commission, which would start the change process. And so we don't know if you're going to want that meeting. We don't know if we will, but somehow we've got to go ahead and schedule a second meeting. So that's what the second request was.
That was the 28th, 29th, something like that.
Yeah. But we'll look at it again because the 28th, 29 came in because we were looking to go to September for the Planning Commission. But if we have another month, then we probably have some more time after that to try to work up into that meeting. That was, I think we were over expedited.
So taking it to the Planning Commission kicks in some sort of timing requirements?
Yes. Yeah. And I'm sorry that Jeff is not here, but we have to submit certain code changes to DLCD, I think it is. Does anybody remember?
It would be DLCD,
Yeah.
but
So we have to get it to them 20 days in advance.
so that's if we're making any changes.
Right.
But we're having meetings to talk about whether we're going to make changes, does not mean we're going to be making changes.
Yes, but if we did, staff was suggesting, or at least putting out the opportunity to expedite some items. And those are the ones, because we're going to have a parallel process for, really looking at everything. But like the combining of lots, that's,
We picked about 4.
Right. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so those, if there's not a lot of controversy with those, let's start getting those. Those will have a high impact right away. But some of the other stuff might, take some time, like how much can DRB be involved with, single family homes and there was.
I'm thinking now that it would be really good to make sure on that first meeting, we delineate which are the ones we want to fast track and which are the ones we don't. Just so that we have that fast track if that's what we want to start working.
And the question will be, do you want to fast track? I call it expedite, to go ahead and do those. One of the things we talked about today was we can tell you, well, staff thinks that there's one regarding the size of the house on a lot of a single family. They didn't. Planning Commission said, well, no, we don't think we want to do that one. But they did come up with a height restriction on the ocean front. And whether you want to expedite that or not, the other ones that we talked about were, pretty big impact that were kind of no-brainers. But you folks are going to have to decide what gets expedited, or if you want to expedite anything. And Sam, we can tell you what we think might be expedited. We can't tell you all the others yet, but that's why we're going to have the meetings.
Okay.
Wasn't one of them eliminating the planned urban development? Our code,
Yep.
one of the ones council felt was high priority.
There should be a discussion on that one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, you know, if you don't, if that's a potential nightmare scenario, let's do it, you know? So, thank you, that was my only item.
Anybody else for good of the order?
I have a couple of things. One, I'm wondering if the council is interested in submitting a statement to the voters pamphlet on the prepared foods tax. If so, our deadline is September 7th, and I think it'll cost about $200. So I don't know if anybody, I'm interested in submitting a statement. I don't know if anybody would like to join me on that. Okay, Brandon?
So having said that, Nancy, we were all given the information from Ashley about in terms of raising funds that we need to establish a PAC.
I don't think so. I think there's a limit as to how much we can spend. I'll have to find that out, but that's a good question.
It brings me to the point that I went to the link that Ashley provided, and it didn't seem very easy.
Didn't seem what?
Very easy to do.
No, I wouldn't recommend establishing a PAC.
But I think it's something that's going to have to be done.
Not a,
I
I don't- I think
Not
take it-
what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I think for the
I think the support committee has decided not to start a PAC.
okay,
They're going to take money out of their own pockets apparently
Okay.
and do whatever it is they're going to do. That's what I understand. I'm not part of that committee, so I don't know. But that's what I
well,
understand.
to your point, yes, I'm interested in.
Okay. Anybody else
Are
interested?
you going to work up a text?
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's a limit of 325 words.
I hate those limits.
Now, the voters pamphlet, is that like an informational, not, is it, or is it advocacy?
It's, it can be advocacy for the, I mean, if the city council does it, obviously city employees can't have anything to do with it. So it has to be city councilors.
Okay, and I'm just not familiar with the voters pamphlet. Is it?
It's a compendium of the ballot measures that are being voted on by the voters, candidates for various offices. It's just a pamphlet comes out with your ballot and it explains what the measure is. That's where your ballot measure information, everything will be contained in.
After all the text that Ashley was talking about,
Yeah,
then they have a section for pro and con.
Mhm.
those in favor and those opposed.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So y'all will come up to $200 or somebody will?
yeah, I guess it would just
Okay.
take out whatever. Brandon, you're interested?
Yes.
Is anybody else interested in it? Sam?
Let me see your text first.
Okay, sure.
I'll let you know.
Robin?
I don't know yet.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know what I had to say that hadn't already been said, but. I guess I'll take Sam.
Okay, sure.
Put together.
I'll put something together and I can't send it out to all of you because that would be considered a meeting. So I'm not sure how to get it sent to you or give
Send it
it.
to Ashley.
Mhm.
Good idea. Okay, I'll send it to Ashley and she can send it out to everybody.
Maybe ask her if you can do that,
Okay. I will do that.
because I think she's actually under some of the same strictures that the city employees are under. So
Yeah.
At least she would know. Okay.
And then the other thing, we have coffee with the counselors on Monday. 9 o'clock Monday morning, bright and early, City Hall or Zoom.
How is the mask thing going? The governor said something about Friday
There's
in public place, buildings.
just gonna put something out tomorrow. what I read. Is that tomorrow or was that today?
It's accurate. Tomorrow there will be an announcement. He's already put an announcement about masks in public places for public buildings for certain employees. So she'll probably increase that tomorrow to all public employees.
So does that mean we can't have people here unless they're wearing masks, or we can't have people here at all?
That's the decision of the city manager and council.
Oh, okay.
And the state government buildings are all,
Yeah.
And the county buildings too now.
that's
Masks
the
are
county
required.
decision, and we haven't heard from the health department yet. Just as an anecdote, I've done it in the gallery for the past week, and what I'm getting more is people just turning around at the door. Oh, you don't have masks? I don't have my mask. I'll go back to the car. So whether they show up again later or not, I can't tell. It is an intriguing study of people's reaction. 90% of them are carrying their masks, and most of them are wearing them.
Yeah.
They come in the gallery, so I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, when I worked the library desk, people come in, because masks are required in the library. And I'd say 95% have their masks, and then we have masks that we can hand out. We even handed out a couple of masks today at the farmer's market. People asked for them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I noticed at the market, and I was there briefly. And, good half of the folks
Yeah.
are wearing their masks.
Yeah.
Proud. So hopefully it's just education,
Yeah.
but I know well, the vaccination.
Well, I went to the dentist and she asked me to remove my mask.
I think that was a good idea.
You were reluctant to do because you knew it followed.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm leaving.
Does that mean we'd put our signs back up?
You got them.
I think they're great. I really like them.
There's one of them, they're in my office, and there's one that's right there at the top. And it disturbed me. And then somebody said, who put the Google eyes on it? And so there's this thing that looks at it all the time that's got Google eyes, not the thing. It's got additional accoutrements to it. So,
Well, somebody's keeping an eye on you. I feel better.
yeah. It's freaky.
Okay, anybody else? We are adjourned.
Thank you.